On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Martha's Vineyard, I want to thank the Martha's Vineyard Museum for this opportunity to be a part of the activities being hosted by the museum to commemorate the centennial of the passage of the 19th Amendment, the amendment giving women in the United States the constitutional right to vote. I will now be citing prepared narrative to respond to questions the museum has posed to the League. 2020, along with the 100-year commemoration of the passage of the 19th Amendment, the local league is celebrating the founding of the League of Women Voters. It was Carrie Chapman Catt, a suffragette, that so many of us learned in history was one of the suffrage movement's leaders, who was instrumental in founding the League of Women Voters on February 14, 1920, just 6 months before the ratification of the 19th Amendment, also known as the Susan B. Anthony Amendment, on August 18, 1920. Chapman Catt said the purpose of the League was, quote, to finish the fight, to educate women gaining the right to vote about what that power meant, about issues and candidates running for public office that they would now be voting on. Remember, a majority of these 26 million women who had not up until this time been involved in or engaged in political issues. The local league is taking the centennial year to revisit the 70+ years of the suffrage movement that led to the House and Senate passing the amendment in the spring of 1919. And the ratification process of 2/3 of the states, with Tennessee being the 36th state to ratify the amendment. And by the way, Mississippi got around to ratifying the amendment in 1984. We're also revisiting the impression that history gave us about this historical legislation on voter rights, the 19th Amendment, that women in the United States could now vote. In fact, it would be another 45 years before four more demographics of women in America could vote. Further historical acts of legislation include the Citizens Act in 1924, which gave Native American women the right to vote. The Magnuson Act in 1943 gave Chinese men and women the right to vote. In 1952, race restrictions of the 1790 naturalization law was repealed by the McCarran-Walter Act, giving first-generation Japanese American, including women, both citizenship and voting rights. And lastly, in 1965, Voting Rights Act that gave African Americans the right to vote. So from this historical period of 1920 that we're commemorating this year, it took America 4+ decades before we became inclusive of all women in the United States. The local league was founded in 1956 and was called initially the League of Women Voters of Tisbury, and in 1966 became the League of Women Voters of Martha's Vineyard. The local league serves as a grassroots to the National League of Women Voters. We work within the positions held by the National League of Women Voters, which are adopted as a result of grassroots effort at the local level through the state league structure to national. One example of this would be a position the league has related to the sustainability of our environment, something very important to all of us living here on an island. On a local level, the League of Women Voters began addressing island-wide refuse and recycling. In the 1970s into the 1980s, League members Margaret Love, Isabella West, Nellie Mendenhall, Ann Kronig, and others took on a leadership role in what later became the Regional Refuse District and Islands recycling programs as we know it today. And we have local league members who are rallying again to be part of the 21st century dialogue about climate change. As before in the 70s and 80s, here locally, the threat that climate change poses to our environment our water bodies, our livelihood. One can certainly bring an issue or cause to the local league. An example, as recently as 5 years ago, we got involved with the school committees when they were at the time wanting to address cost and cost sharing between schools. A resident of Oak Bluffs, Peter Pouches, addressed the local league and requested support from the league to host forums on cost-saving initiatives the schools and school committees could assess in their budgets. We conducted a year-long series of public meetings with school committee members and the community of teachers, staff, and townspeople that could identify and share cost-saving measures that schools could undertake. On a humorous note, it was actually then Superintendent Dr. James Wise who used the example of toilet paper. If all the island schools just did bulk ordering of toilet paper, there would be a substantial amount of money that could be saved. Certainly more substantial savings could be achieved in the areas of classroom equipment and other capital purchases. I know it brings a smile, and it certainly brought chuckles to us at the league level, that as an illustration of something the local league could get involved in, something as simple as saving money for the towns on toilet paper. And of course, here we are in the throes of a national worldwide pandemic, and toilet paper came back into our everyday conversations. Not cost, but availability. Back to the league and its original mission of informing citizens about voting and voting registration. As we near the general elections in November, the League of Women Voters of Martha's Vineyard will continue to educate Vineyard residents, particularly those who are eligible to vote, on the new statute about mail-in ballots for the 2020 elections. The mail-in ballot is replacing the absentee ballot, which of course, as we all know, that one had to have a qualifying reason why one could not go to the ballot box to vote on election day. In fact, what is happening, there are no qualifications other than being eligible and registered to vote in order to have a mail-in ballot. And with that, I will say any questions one has here on the Vineyard to please contact your town's clerk's office. We're finding it ironic that here we are at our 100 years commemoration of that significant milestone with the passage of the 19th Amendment, and we are still needing to address the potential barriers to voting, making it as seamless and accessible as we can for everyone on the island and in this country. And lastly, the local league will be holding candidate forums, something that we do every spring for town elections. Zoom are safely indoors to be determined, where voters can hear more information about the local candidates for Dukes County Commission and the Martha's Vineyard Commission. And I think with that, the League of Women Voters would like to again thank the Martha's Vineyard Museum for this opportunity to talk about our local league, the contribution we think we offer to the Vineyard community, along with so many other island groups and agencies.